Let me paint a picture for you. A parent sits down one weekend and builds their kid the most thoughtful homework system you've ever seen. Color-coded planner, every subject gets its own time block, check-ins every hour so nothing slips through the cracks. It was genuinely impressive, the kind of thing you'd pin on a Pinterest board. And then their daughter sat down with me and told me it made her feel like she was going to suffocate. If you ever poured real effort into helping your kid get organized and watched them completely shut down anyway, this video was for you. Here's what we're going to cover today. First, why even the most well-intentioned system backfires and what's really driving them. Second, the one question that tells you more about how your kid's brain works than any planner ever could. Third, how to hand them the wheel while staying in the car. And finally, the ongoing conversations that turn trial and error into a skill they'll carry for the rest of their lives. Let's get into it. The real problem, anxiety in disguise. So let's start here. Why do the systems fail? The easy answer is wrong system, wrong brain. But I want to go a little deeper than that because I think there's something more important happening that almost nobody talks about. When a parent builds systems for their kids, it's almost always coming from a place of genuine love. The late night watching their kids stress, the fear that they're falling behind, the worry that without some structure, everything is going to fall apart. And so they do what any caring parent does. They try to fix the situation. But here's the thing. A system built to manage a parent's anxiety and a system built to work with the kid's brain are almost always two completely different things. The color-coded planner, the hourly check-in, the rigid time blocks. Those things might work beautifully for the parents who made them. They might be exactly how the parent's brain operates. But the imposing that system on a kid who thinks differently doesn't reduce the friction, it adds to it. And the kid isn't being ungrateful, they're not being difficult, and they just know somewhere deep down inside that the system wasn't built for them. It was built at them. And there's a big difference in that. That brings me to Sofia. Let me tell you about one of my students, Sofia. Sofia was one of the sharpest students I've ever worked with. She was genuinely curious, articulate, and very capable. But by the time her parents brought her to me, every conversation about homework had become a battle. And her parents had tried everything, including that color-coded system I described at the top. When I sat down with Sofia for the first time, I didn't talk about that planner. I asked her a simple question. What does it feel like when you try to sit down and work? And she said something I've never forgotten to this day. She told me that working through her parent system felt like being driven somewhere in a car. She could see out the window, she knew where she was going, but she had no control over how they were going to get there. And that feeling, she said, made her want to get out of that car entirely. She wasn't ungrateful. She knew her parents were trying to help, but the system they built was a system that would help them, not her. Now, before I tell you what we did about it, I want to pause here because what Sofia described is key to everything in this video. Let's talk about the hardest shift, letting go of the wheel. Here's the part of this conversation that I think is the most important, but it's probably the hardest. When you hear that the system you built isn't working, the instinct is to fix the system. Let's rebuild it, make it better, add more structure or take some away. But that's still you driving. And the real shift, the one that actually changes things, is recognizing that your kid needs to be the one behind the wheel. Not because you don't know any better, not because structure doesn't matter, but because a system your kid didn't build is a system that they will always resist. Now, I know that what you're thinking is if I let go, everything will fall apart. And I want to be honest with you, that fear makes complete sense. Because for a lot of parents, staying in control of the process is how they manage the anxiety of watching their kids struggle. Stepping back feels like giving up. It feels irresponsible. But here's the reframe. Letting go of the wheel doesn't mean that you're getting out of the car. You're still there. You're still present. Your job just changes from driver to navigator. Your kid is finding their own route. And when their working memory pulls them off course, and it will, because that's just how teenage brains work, You're there to gently say, hey, remember where we're headed. Let's find our way back. That presence without control sends your kid a message that they're desperately needing to hear. Figuring out is okay. You are safe to try, and I am here no matter what. That safety is everything. And it starts with one question. So let's talk about this diagnostic question. So instead of handing Sophia a new system, I got curious. I asked her, how do you eventually start? Not, why haven't you started yet, Sophia? Not, you need to start now, Sophia. Just, how do you eventually start? And like most teenagers, when you ask them that genuinely, she thought about it and said, when I actually care about the subject, I just go. And when I don't, I need to move around first. I can't just sit down cold. That one answer told me more about Sophia's brain than any planner could. She wasn't resisting work. She had conditions under which she could work, and nobody had ever asked her what they were. This is the diagnostic question. And it works because it shifts the conversation from compliance to curiosity. You're not telling them what to do. You're asking them to look inwards and start building self-awareness about their own process. What gets me started? What does my brain need? What environment actually works for me? Every kid's answer is different. Some need urgency, some need silence, some need to start with the thing they like most, even if it isn't due first. And that's okay. The goal isn't to find the objectively correct system. The goal is to find their system, which brings us back to Sophia. So let's talk about Sophia again. Once I understand how Sophia actually worked, we stopped trying to fix the old systems and started to build a new one with her, not for her. Three things emerged pretty quickly. First, she needed to move while she worked. And I mean that literally. Sitting at the desk for 2 hours straight was never going to happen for her. And forcing it was creating more resistance than the homework itself. So we stopped fighting it. Sophia started foam rolling her back and her legs in the middle of long study sessions. It became her way of releasing the physical tension that built up when she had been sitting for too long. On the days that she had more time, she worked at a standing desk with a walking treadmill, moving at a slow pace while she was reading or reviewing notes. It sounds unconventional, but it worked really well. Because for Sophia, movement wasn't a distraction. It was the condition for focus. Second, she needed to start with a subject that she was most engaged with. And for Sophia, that was history. She loved the logic, the drama, and the way that everything connected. And what we discovered was that dropping into that kind of thinking first, complex, analytical, cause and effect, actually primed her brain for chemistry, which on the surface felt completely different, but underneath required the exact same logical muscles. Starting with what she loved wasn't avoidance. It was a warm-up. Third, and most importantly, she needed defined goals. And this is where Sophia really started to own her process. We noticed early on that when she sat down to study history without a specific focus, she'd fall into a rabbit hole. She loved the subject so much that she'd spend an hour going deep on something she was fascinated with and never made it to math homework. So we started naming the target before she opened the book. Not just study history, but something like, tonight I'm gonna focus on the difference in feudalism between these two countries in the Middle Ages. Specific, bounded, completable. That defined goal kept the end in mind, gave her a finish line, and critically made it possible to close the book and move on. She wasn't abandoning something she loved. She was finishing what she came to do. That moment, Sophia had real ownership over those three things. How she moved, where she started, and what she was aiming for. She stopped fighting the process entirely. Her grades didn't change overnight, but her relationship to the work did. And that's the harder thing to build. Grades can fluctuate. The ability to show up for your own work, that compounds. Now, here's where most people stop. They find something that works and they call it done. But what I've learned from working with students like Sophia is that this is actually where the real work begins. Next, let's talk about the ongoing conversations and how we build the system together. Once your kids start showing up and trying, that's when we introduce the metacognitive conversations. And these are simple. They don't need to be long. It's questions like, what worked this week? Why do you think it worked? What didn't go as planned? And why do you think that was? You're not grading them and you're not problem solving for them. You're helping them look back at their own process and extract something useful from them. This does two things. First, it keeps the end in mind, a concept from the 7 habits that is incredibly relevant here. When kids regularly reflect on where they're headed and how they're going to get there, they develop a much stronger sense of purpose and direction. Second, it builds adaptability. Because here's the truth. As your kid grows up, their environment is going to change. There's going to be new demands, new school, college, work. The system that works at 15 might not work at 18. The one that works freshman year of college is going to fall apart junior year. The kid who knows how to build and rebuild their own approach, who have practiced asking themselves what's working and what needs change, are the ones who don't fall apart when the context shifts. So try something for a week, or for the next chapter, or for the next exam, and then sit down and talk about it. Not to evaluate whether they did it right, but to genuinely understand what they've learned about themselves in the process. And here's the reassurance I want to leave with you before we wrap up. I want to say this because I know I needed to hear it when I was going through this with my kid. Your kid is almost certainly always going to need you. That doesn't go away. It just changes shape. The goal of everything we've talked about today isn't to make yourself irrelevant. It's to shift the kind of help you're offering from control to presence, from imposing to guiding, from fixing to asking. When you help in the way your kid actually wants to be helped, something important happens. They learn it's safe to ask. And that open door is what you want to protect more than anything else. Because the teenager who knows they can come to you when they're stuck without judgment, without you taking over, is the teenager who will keep coming back to you as they get older. That relationship is built one conversation at a time. And the conversation we've talked about today is exactly how you start. Now, none of this is going to feel natural the first time. Letting go of the wheel is going to be uncomfortable. Sitting with your kids trial and error without jumping in to fix it, that takes practice. But every time you choose curiosity over control, you are making a deposit into a relationship your kid will come back to. Now, in part 3, we're going to talk about something that quietly undermines even the best internal systems, the home environment. The noise, the energy, the family dynamics happening in the background while your kid is trying to work. It matters more than most people realize. And there are some simple shifts that make an enormous difference. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment below. Like and subscribe for more. Till next time.